Hey everyone, and welcome to RPG Horror Stories with DnD Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a player that uses Control Person in a gross way and physically gets thrown out of a game of Dungeons & Dragons. A story about how a player just can't understand how gods can exist in a Warhammer RPG, and much more. But before we get into those, here's Alice to remind you to like the video and subscribe.
Allie.
Thanks, Alice. Now I think we are ready for some D&D horror story cringe. Fighter saves me from a potentially abusive relationship by Reddit user IntelligentCake5922. Posting on an alt because anxiety. This isn't so much a horror story as one that could have turned horrific. I started playing Dungeons & Dragons about 6 months ago. A coworker told me that her husband and friends play regularly, and she thought that I'd enjoy it. So they invited me over, and we have been playing together since. There were 2 dungeon masters in the friend group, but the one running an upcoming one-shot we'll just call DM. He's my coworker's husband, and an overall really nice guy, and a great dungeon master. He's the one who runs the campaign that I'm in now. My coworker we'll call Druid. There's also another friend from the party, Wizard. And then there's Fighter. Fighter is the other dungeon master of the group. He runs his own campaign and has been for years. By far the most experienced of all of us, despite being one of the younger members. I had started seeing this guy a few weeks ago, and given that I hadn't dated since high school because of some really bad experiences, I was more than a bit nervous. But he was really nice and reassuring, and didn't try to pressure me into anything. Even so, my friends wanted to meet him and set up a one-shot to break the ice. Boyfriend had been playing for a year or so, and knew the rules, so we both agreed. Boyfriend picked me up the night of, and we went over to DM in Druid's house. The one-shot was pirate-themed. We were hired mercenaries trying to retrieve a sunken treasure from a shipwreck. Everything went smoothly with the first 2 hours of the session. Wizard did wizard things, Druid turned into a dolphin, and Fighter spent most of his time supporting the rest of us with his skills, roleplay, items, and clever use of cantrips. He always made it a point to ask me and Boyfriend, the 2 quieter members of the group, what we thought about a situation, or the best way to handle an obstacle. I played a rogue, and Boyfriend played a bard. Things took a turn when we got to a grotto that supposedly had a map to the shipwreck. Inside was a mermaid. We managed to convince her to let us borrow the map, but only for 10 minutes. Fighter, Druid, and Wizard took the map back to our boat to copy it and chart a course, and they left me and Boyfriend to watch the mermaid to keep her from trying anything sketchy. As soon as we were alone, Boyfriend turned to the Dungeon Master and said, "I cast Charm Person on the mermaid." Dungeon Master responded, "Sure, these mermaids are technically humanoids, so no problem." She fails the save and is charmed. Then Boyfriend turned to me and smiled. "Boyfriend, do you want to F her?" Me, "What? No." Boyfriend, "She's charmed. All you have to do is ask, and she will agree." At this point, Dungeon Master is dumbfounded and can't find words. Fighter, however, spoke up. Fighter, "Yeah, no, we aren't doing that." Boyfriend, "You're not there. You don't know what's happening." Fighter, "My character doesn't, but I do know, and I'm saying that we aren't doing that." Boyfriend, "It's Rogue's choice." He then turned to me and asked, "Do you want to?" I was too shocked to say anything, and just faintly shook my head. Boyfriend, "Oh, fine. Way to make me waste a spell slot." Dungeon Master, "Hey man, that's super not cool. We shouldn't have to ask you to not use magic to coerce sex from someone." Boyfriend and Dungeon Master argued for almost 5 minutes about how Boyfriend didn't do anything because he offered the choice to me, so he shouldn't be punished for it because it's not like he raped her or anything. Eventually, Fighter got up and told Boyfriend to leave. Boyfriend then told him, "Not until we finish, then Rogue and me will leave." Fighter told him that he was leaving now. Boyfriend stood up and got in his face and told Fighter to make him, and pushed Fighter's shoulders back. I should mention at this time that Boyfriend was about 4 inches taller than Fighter and had probably 40 pounds on him. Fighter elbowed him under the chin, grabbed him by the back of the belt, and dragged him to the door, opening it, and pulled Boyfriend outside, closing the door behind them. All of us were gobsmacked and didn't say anything. I was on the verge of a panic attack, and Dungeon Master went pale. 30 seconds later, Fighter walked back inside, collected Boyfriend's things, opened the door, and threw the bag onto Boyfriend, who was laying face down in the grass. Fighter apologized to everyone, especially me, and said that Boyfriend was going home, and that any of the party would be happy to drop me off at my flat whenever I liked. We then took a recess for a few minutes to calm down. We started playing again, and before long, I got a string of angry texts from Boyfriend about Fighter and the rest of the group, and how he was trying to do something sexy to get me in the mood for that night after he took me home, all of which I ignored. We finished the session, and Druid took me home. The next day at work, Druid showed me an arrest record where Boyfriend had caught a domestic violence charge 3 years ago. With that, I broke up with him and haven't heard from him since. I'm writing this here to thank Fighter for what he did. I know violence isn't the answer, but who knows what could have happened if I had stayed with Boyfriend and refused him sexually. Fighter stood up for me and saved me from probably getting hurt by that guy, and I'm too scared to thank him. So, Fighter, thank you so much. I hope one day I can let you know how grateful I am. Wow, talk about a creepy scumbag. I know that OP said violence isn't the answer, but by the sounds of it, Boyfriend instigated with Fighter, and thus, effed around and found out, by being tossed out of the house like the bag of garbage he was. Plus, the Boyfriend texting after being thrown out and saying that he did it to, quote, get OP in the mood for later, is disturbing. It's no wonder that after doing a search, that Druid found out that he had a previous domestic abuse charge. So Fighter definitely helped OP dodge what could have become a worse situation. Though I'm not sure why OP is afraid to thank Fighter. I don't think there is any reason to not let him know how grateful she is. Maybe she could buy him a set of dice as a thank you. Though, what are your thoughts on this one? Let's move on. My character is an atheist. Cringe Athiest, quote, breaks my campaign. By Reddit user, NoNebula2615. Hello there. It's not that much of a horror story. More like a short tale of cringe and heavy facepalms. A few years ago, I had an idea to run a Warhammer fantasy campaign set in the horrible French wasteland of Bretonnia. For those not familiar, imagine a romantic view of Arthurian England, set in a stereotypical version of France, how the British think would be. The campaign itself never really got into its first session, due to me being a lazy POS, and my regular group of players being uninterested in the half-arsed setting I made. But that's just how things go. I would have completely forgotten about the entire endeavor, if not for one of the most cringiest moments I experienced as a dungeon master. So I wanted to expand my regular group, and had a new acquaintance from university. Cringy was an okay dude, and even after this story, I had a few bumps into him, where we usually had an okay time chatting and memeing. Nothing's wrong with the guy, but he could be a giant cringe lord from time to time. But hey, he that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone. So, on to the story. During our regular short chats with Cringy, He mentioned playing Dungeons & Dragons before, but his friend group dispersed after a few sessions. He was still interested in the hobby and wanted to play, to which I said that you are lucky. Though I didn't run Dungeons & Dragons, I told him about my plan to run a Warhammer Fantasy short campaign and asked him if he was interested to try out a different system. He said okay, and after both of us got home, we jumped onto Discord to have an unofficial Session 0. I started to explain the Warhammer world, mainly focusing on the main setting. He was usually silent during all of this, sometimes asking a few questions, but overall it was okay. When I finished, I asked him if he was still interested in it, to which he said, "Cringy, I want to bring a character who is not a believer." I tried to explain to him that it's not really an option, hence the gods in Warhammer usually interfere with mortal affairs. Some countries are even being either directly advised or even ruled by living gods. Cringy, I don't buy it. Me, what? Cringy, I think you just want to set me up, and the gods later will turn out to be just, I don't know, evil wizards who pretend to be gods to steal money from people. Me, huh? Cringy, oh, sorry. Did I ruin your big reveal? I still can't forget the amount of smugness in his voice when he said it, although I thought he was either joking or I was the one who explained the setting wrong. I tried to explain again, constantly asking him if my explanation is understandable for him. Cringy, oh, you don't need to pretend that I didn't foresee your big reveal. I'm just too smart for that. At this point, I realized that he wasn't joking, and I just got irritated by his unapologetic smugness. I had a brief thought for a moment. Having to deal with problem players before and after gave me every reason to think that this behavior is not a good sign, and I didn't really have the mental capacity to deal with that. So I just told him that he was right, that he is too smart for me, and since he already saw my big reveal at the end of the campaign, then I can't help it. I told him that he won the campaign because of it, and that maybe he should not come. We parted in a civilized way, and still talk occasionally, but I never invited him to play with us ever again. Wow, Cringy sounds like he was a few gods short of a pantheon. Now, I'm not all that well versed in Warhammer lore, but the way OP explained it, gods and goddesses are as real as our need to drink water, and Cringy wanting to bring in an atheist character really wouldn't make sense. Perhaps a character that has a grudge against the gods and goddesses of the Warhammer world could work, and maybe OP could have suggested that. But by the sounds of it, no explanation of the lore would make Cringy back down, so perhaps it was just best to let him think that he was too smart for OP's quote-unquote big reveal, and just leave him out of the game. Let's move on. The time cops had to tase a missing player mid-session, by Reddit user Geek Incarnate. So this happened years ago in college, around 2003 to 2004, and isn't much of a horror story about the game. I was dungeon mastering at the time, and we had 4 solid players, and then a couple players that would show up now and then. With it being college, we had people that wanted to play, but couldn't always show up, so it wasn't a big deal if a couple people didn't show. We were playing downstairs in the commons area. One of our roommates was planning on showing, but he said he might be late, which was no biggie, so we start playing. About an hour in, our roommate shows up. He is very wet, like he showered with his clothes on, and he is very drunk and or high. He's screaming and yelling, flailing his arms around. We talk for a minute, trying to figure out what he has taken, and then, mid-sentence, he just leaves. So we go back to playing. We don't know what to do at the time, and he tends to go on crazy benders, and we aren't about to go snitch on him for getting a little too high or drunk. One of our other roommates shows up about a half an hour later, and we tell him what's up. We lived in a quote suite, where it's 3 rooms of 2, with a living room area that we share. So me and 5 roommates/suite mates. Then our messed up roomie comes back. He suddenly jumps onto the table and starts pointing at us around the table, saying, "I'll kill you, I'll kill you, I'll kill you, I'll kill you," as he points to each player. Then he points at me, saying, "I don't think I can kill you." I'm a scrawny dude, and he's like twice my size. So yeah, I'd be screwed. He then starts yelling about how he's gonna kill everyone, jumps off the table, runs off, eats crap trying to jump a couch, and then grabs a big cushion chair and runs off with it. The other roommate says that he'll follow him and find the RA. We're not really sure what to do, so the game's on pause while some of the players go find someone who can help. Someone else in the comments told us that they were going to go find a phone and call security, which was a good idea at that time. Maybe 10 minutes later, and he is back, and sans clothing now, just ass naked, losing his crap in the commons of our building. He tries to pick up the couch that he ate crap on earlier, and just ends up flipping it, and then he goes around chucking all the furniture. The players leave, and me and the roomie that was trying to follow him keep well away just so we know where he is going. Luckily, right then, there is a lot of flashing lights outside. The cops had been called, and there are several cop cars, a fire truck, the whole ball of wax, and the commons outside wall is all windows. So he sees this and starts heading outside, so we follow. He goes out and just starts screaming at the cops about how he's going to kill everyone, and that they can't stop him, plus a few unintelligible words. He gets about 10 feet from the lead cop, and with no hesitation, the cop shoots him with a taser and he drops hard, and they keep tasing him, and tasing him, and tasing him, until finally they get him in cuffs, on a gurney, and out of there. Afterwards, after rubbernecking and talking with the other rubberneckers, we went back in and finished our session. Overall, it was a good game of Dungeons & Dragons. We were in like session 3 of the Savage Tides module from 3.5. A hell of a good module. You get a ship, you travel the high seas, and even the abyssal seas. It's super cool. I have no clue what happened to him. He never came back for his stuff, and no one ever contacted us about him. Nothing. End of the second semester, and we pack our stuff and leave, with no clue at all where he was or what happened. We asked some of the other people on the floor, and no one had been with him that night. We did have a roommate that we despised that was dealing drugs. He did not return for the second semester either, but that was because he kept dealing from his room, after we told him to do it anywhere else but here. And we were sick of his crap, so he mysteriously got busted. But they hated each other, as the crazy roommate had pissed on the dealer's bed after we told him to stop dealing from our dorm room, and he didn't listen, so they definitely weren't buddies. So we aren't sure if something happened there, but our Dungeons & Dragons games went great, just as they always had. So not really sure if this counts as an RPG horror story. Well, it certainly is a horror story, and it happened during a game of Dungeons & Dragons, so I would say that it counts. At first, it seemed like their roommate may have just overdone it with the drinking or some other substance, but when he came back and started to threaten everyone and wrecking the place, then I would say it was time to get him under control. To me, it sounds like he was probably on spice. It's basically gas station drugs that can make someone lose their minds. And I actually have an old high school friend that did that crap years ago, and she is now in prison for killing her youngest daughter while on that crap. So yeah, that stuff is evil. And it's good that OP and nobody else was hurt during this. At least it sounds like everyone else still plays together and has fun. But yeah, if anyone ever offers you that spice crap, tell them to get bent. Let's move on. The highly annoying player made D&D game very hard. A rant. By Reddit user, I wish I knew it sooner. This is kind of a rant about a horror player, since I can't talk with other people who would understand me. I saw a search for the group that was going to play one of the D&D settings I had never had a chance to play, but always wanted to since the setting itself is pretty much aligned with my interests. I decided it was also the chance to try my best in the character I had never managed to play, but now got a chance to. So we all gathered together, and yeah, you know, there is always that one person you know from the start, especially when they greet you with, "Oh, you will hate my character." Hence, we met the most tiring player I have ever played with. Let's call him Greg. Greg wants to be everything, everyone, and every party role. Greg started with better starting equipment that he had no way of buying because it would all be too expensive, and he will use that to put up his AC to incredibly high numbers with not so starting equipment. And no, we did not start with any bonus things as a group. Greg will also use it not according to any rules, giving his character an unfair advantage, like an additional attack bonus that would not work with the type of weapons. Will argue that he can do it the way he's doing it, and will only be ruled a no-go by the Dungeon Master because another player pointed out how unfair it was to the rest of the group. Greg wants his character to excel in everything. Hence, Greg's character is an amazing diplomat and warrior, having the abilities to drive around in many vehicles and take care of many animals, being the best rogue and fighter, both in melee and in distance, creating amazing craftsmanship and being a great performer, knowing their ways around cities and wilderness alike, coming from an amazingly rich and powerful family that no one's ever heard of. And Greg's character is the desire of many people. This was not played as a joke. Greg rolls for everything at every time. Even if other people made their checks on the side, Greg would roll as well, no matter if Greg is near or not. Greg complains multiple times that his previous party, in the other game, caused him so much trouble, and he hates being the responsible one. Though no one is making any irrational decisions, Greg still feels obliged to remind us how he is the reasonable one. Greg's character is a very recognizable criminal, but of course in a good Robin Hood style of way, who goes around without any cover and just bumps themselves into high-end fancy opera performances without any issues whatsoever. Greg's character never feels bad for anything they do, even if the fight that the party started, hundreds of people were killed as casualties. But Greg's character never killed anyone in the fight, even with a blade in the neck. Greg is constantly trying to be a group leader and spokesman, even if we already have that role in my character. Greg took a feat to be better than my character. Greg knew from the beginning that I would be playing a character targeted at speaking, and that I would be weak at everything else. I have to fight with Greg to speak at all, because Greg tends to scream whatever they want to say. Greg behaves like he is 14, though Greg is almost 40. I tried talking with Greg and explaining that I don't feel so good with my character being in the background in the moments that I could shine, because then I don't get to do anything. Though Greg ignored me because his character is, quote, supposed to be a leader and is very charismatic. I know that I'm not here to hog the spotlight. I don't want to do that. Though I am no longer in the game, as I knew I would never find myself to like Greg. Yep, Greg definitely sounds like a spotlight hog with main character syndrome. But I got to say, aside from the one time that he said no to Greg, where was the Dungeon Master in all of this? It almost sounds like the Dungeon Master was giving Greg special treatment over the other players by allowing this behavior. So while Greg does sound like an annoying player to play with, I would say that he wasn't the full horror story here. Though, at least OP lived by the no D&D is better than bad D&D motto, and left that game, as I would have as well. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.